Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. I have the wonderful Halli Gomez on the podcast with me today. Her book, List of 10, comes out in just a few days and is one that I think you guys are going to love. It hits some hard topics and some deep topics, but I think it is something that a lot of people are going to be glad they read, and people will see themselves in some way. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy getting to know Halli and hearing about her book. Well, Halli, can you tell me all about your upcoming novel, List of 10?
So this novel is a young adult novel. It's about a boy living with Tourette syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder, and he plots his suicide with the inadvertent help of a beautiful girl who also shows him that life may hold more possibilities than he imagined.
Wow. I'm super excited to read this. When I was first chatting with you and read the blurb for it, I was like, this is great. I mean, because as somebody, I've struggled with anxiety and depression my whole life and have had, suicidal ideations, which I think is something you would be surprised that a lot of people, right, at some point in their life have gone through. And so I think that that there will be a lot of people who will be able to find something and a connection to this book. And, sometimes it's hard to write about and attack those kind of dark things, but that are very, very real and a lot of people struggle with.
That's what I'm hoping, that people will read it and realize that they're not alone, that other people have these same thoughts and feelings, and knowing you're not alone, I think is one step to getting help.
Definitely.
So that's what I hope this will do.
I love that. I think that is so great, and I'm excited to see the reaction and to have, you get to hear those connections from readers, because that's always the best part, right?
Yes, for sure.
Well, tell me a little bit about your journey through publishing to getting to this point, to having your book come out into the world.
Well, the List of 10 is the third novel that I wrote. The first two are in a drawer. Very deep. This is the first young adult novel that I wrote. And for how I came to have this one to be published, at one of my local conferences, they were having a manuscript critique by agents. And I thought, well, actually, on the advice of my boys, they said, sure, go ahead and do it. So I entered the manuscript critique. And that's where I met my agent, and she loved it and wanted to get behind it, and she found a publisher who loved it just as much as we do, and really wanted to bring the story into the world, which is wonderful.
That is so wonderful, and I think that your journey and story shows that there are, it's good to try and stay connected and to do maybe those other things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to find your path through there.
Right.
Because there's lots of ways to get where we all want to be.
Absolutely. It's not just like straight queering or not necessarily contest. There are so many different avenues. And I think if we just kind of look around and maybe try a little of this and a little of that, you never know what you'll find.
Yeah, very true. So tell me, did you ever query agents, like, write the dreaded query letter?
Oh my gosh, I did. That is my least favorite part of absolutely everything. I queried this book just a little bit, and actually, so the agent that I met at the manuscript critique, who I signed with, she loved it, loved every single word, didn't change a thing. But I had another agent that I queried who I think she hated every single word of this. And I understand for sure that it is a very hard subject. But yeah, the querying is definitely definitely the hardest, most painful part. But it's very subjective, so I'm glad that I found somebody who loved it.
Yes, querying is so subjective, and I love that you bring that up because querying is so hard. It can be so, you can just feel so dejected throughout the whole process as you keep getting no in your inbox. But it is so subjective, and you almost should be grateful for that because you want to find the one person, or if you get multiple agents who are just as passionate about it as you are.
Yeah, I bet when people ask me, if they're in the querying process and, how did you find your agent and what did you ask and that kind of thing, really, for me, you have to find somebody who loves your work as much as you do, because they're not going to get behind it like they really need to if it doesn't mean anything to them.
Exactly.
It shouldn't be just another book, whether it's a book like this or, let's say the next book I wrote was a young adult thriller, but I want somebody to love that just as much. So, yeah, it is all about making that connection, for sure.
Yes, such a good thing to remember. What would you say, like, your top tip or your maybe your top tips would be for anybody who is querying?
Well, number one, I would say just to remember that it is so subjective. And, you can even see that in books that you read. Some you love, some you don't love.
Right.
But if your writing is solid and your story is solid, then there will be somebody who loves it just as much as you do. And I think that is the most important part, and to hold on. And rejection is, I know it is brutal and heartbreaking, but there is that right person out there. You just have to find them.
You do. And that can take longer than we want. I'm a very
unfortunately.
Yes. I'm a very impatient person. So I'm the kind of person who's like, okay, I want this now, right? I don't want to have to wait years and years, but there's almost so much character building that comes through the querying process.
Oh, that is true, because it doesn't end from there. Once you have an agent and you have a book, then you have to query editors, and it's the same thing all over again. Some love it, some hate it. Unfortunately, the rejection is a never-ending process, but we still keep doing this over and over. I don't know why.
It's just for the love of story, okay? That's why we do it.
We have to. Yep. I haven't met a single writer who has told me that they could just stop.
No.
It's in you, and you just have to do it.
Yeah, I've had those moments, like one where I got a really hard edit letter, and I was like, ugh, there was one part of my book that I just was my favorite thing. I loved this point of view and the way it was written, and in that edit letter, it said, that's not working, and it, in their opinion, needed to go, and really after I thought about it, I agreed with them, but I was like, I'm quitting, I'm gonna be done, I'm never writing a thing again, but I couldn't. I could never actually do that. That would be ridiculous.
Right.
What do you do? Well,
yeah.
Well, so far on your publishing journey, could you tell me what your favorite part has been and your least favorite part?
Well, my favorite part is just finding other people who love the book as much as I do. And this one in particular, I think, is so important, especially these days when everybody's going through such a hard time and there's a lot of anxiety and depression. I think it's important that the book gets out there, and I'm happy that I found others that will champion it. For sure. So that's definitely my favorite part. My least favorite part is the waiting. Oh my gosh, it takes forever. Even with when you sign the contract and even when the deal is announced, you do copy edits, and then you wait, and then there's more copy edits, and then you wait. And I know things are happening behind the scenes.
Right.
But my part was done at that point and I couldn't do anything. I felt so helpless. Like, let me do something. Let me write something else. I don't know. Yeah, the waiting is, I am not a patient person either. And the waiting is so difficult.
Oh, yeah. I am with you there. I am not. I have heard that from many authors on this podcast and with this question, because it is like so much behind the scenes that you can't see. It's getting done, but is it really getting done fast enough? Could it be getting done faster?
Yeah. Not fast enough for our taste,
yes,
I think.
Right. The publishing industry would be so fast if it was run by the really impatient authors, wouldn't it?
Oh, I know. That absolutely.
That would be so lovely.
Yes.
Yes. My next question is more about your writing style. Do you find yourself being more of a pantser, more of a planner, or do you fall somewhere in between?
Definitely in between. Kind of like a planster, I think. So I just started actually a new manuscript. So this is kind of perfect timing. So once I have the idea and the characters and their stories, then I kind of make like a rough outline, and I'll follow it a little bit, but for sure the characters will take me on different paths.
Yeah.
So I don't stick to it 100%. I just stick to the general idea of where I start, kind of what might happen in the middle, and then, what I want to happen at the end. So, yeah, the characters, I kind of let them guide me with what feels right. So maybe I am more of a pantser.
I think you're good. You're in between, definitely. I think there's such a magic about letting your characters guide you, isn't there? I mean, I love that aspect of writing, of just sitting down and being like, okay, here's kind of where we need to go. Like, what do we want to do to get there? I think people, if you say that to people who aren't writers, they think you're insane. But to other writers, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I had a conversation with my boy's grandfather about letting the characters kind of take you where they want to go, and he did not understand at all. He was a psychologist in very black and white, and did not understand at all about letting this figment of your imagination drive the story.
Right.
So, yes, but writers will understand for sure.
They definitely understand. Yeah, and maybe it's just something we shouldn't mention to non-writers because they'll look at us really funny.
That's a smart idea.
Well, my next thing, I would love for you to share something with me that your readers wouldn't necessarily know about you.
Let me see. So for a writing story, but more like a reading story. Before I started writing a long time ago, I was always a reader, and I would volunteer at the Miami Book Fair when I lived in Miami, Florida, just so I could be near all of the authors and, read all the books and everything. But one day I was at a booth, and this author came up to me and was doing a signing, but he needed a copy of his book. So I was going to give it to him because it's his book. But he said, no, I'll buy it. I have to buy it from you because I need the royalties. The author was Stephen King.
Oh, my goodness.
Stephen King absolutely does not need to add to the royalties for his book, but he was so sweet and so funny, and he refused to just take it, and he paid me for his own book. I thought that was so funny.
That's amazing. That's very cool.
and he was nice enough to sign a copy of his book for me too, which I love. Yes,
that is super nice. Yeah, he definitely probably doesn't need any more royalties though.
Yeah,
he's probably,
I don't think so.
He's probably set.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, my next thing, I'd love to know how much time you spend writing every day, and typically, well, I'm using the same word, but the question is really on a typical day, but I feel like no day is typical anymore with everything that we've got going on. So just kind of, what is your normal schedule, and, you know, what do you try and get yourself to do every day to write?
Well, I try to average about 3 hours a day. The weekends, of course, I'm a little bit more open since I work during the week. But so I'll, you know, get up a little bit, have to wake up, have coffee, and then I'll try to start writing a little bit, kind of get the juices flowing. So I'm more of a morning writer because I work in the afternoon, but I try to average about 3 hours a day.
That's good.
Of course, I would love it to be a lot more, but, you know.
I think that is still a great, you know, number of hours. And I think regardless of how much time you actually get done, it's always nice to give yourself a goal, right? Like, to have something to shoot for. That's always really helpful in the writing process, I found, for myself at least.
Oh, for me too. So either a time frame or a word count.
Yeah.
I need to set those kind of goals and have those kind of deadlines, definitely.
Yeah, I try and do, like, my new goal that I'm trying to put into place is 1,000 words every day. Because I think I can do that. I'm like, oh, I could finish a draft in a few months and, like, be good. And, you know, like, that seems doable. And I so far that's been a really achievable goal for me. So that's been pleasant. I'm pleasantly surprised by that progress.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a nice amount of words to really get, you know, into a scene or into a chapter. Yeah, that's good.
And I found that sometimes, like, I'll get on a roll, and then I'm like, oh, I get even more than 1,000, because you get, you know, into a groove. Obviously, some days I'm like, okay, there's no way. I mean, I have 3 children. The smallest is less than a year old. I'm like, okay, sometimes I don't have the capacity for it, but on those days when it works, it's definitely helpful.
Oh, yeah. And the days that you can write a little bit more, then you kind of average out a little bit too, probably.
Yes. Yeah. It's very good. It's been working out good for me. So cross your fingers that keeps going.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah.
Well, my next question is just really about, like, writing all together, and writing is such a solitary process. It can be such an emotional process too, depending on what you're writing. And I imagine as you wrote List of 10, you know, that there was some emotion and some things that your characters really had to work through that were deep and you know, maybe affected you as you wrote them. I know sometimes as I've written stuff like that, it definitely takes it out of me. But how do you handle all of that? Like, being a human being, writing as a very exhausting process sometimes. How does that manifest in your life?
Yeah, this was definitely, this book definitely took a lot out of me. It was very personal. So I had to take some breaks. My biggest kind of stress reliever is going for a walk or moving. I like fresh air, so I'll put on some music and just walk and let my mind wander. I'll do yoga or exercise or, you know, something just to kind of change my thought process a little bit.
Yeah.
I also will kind of switch things up a little bit, and maybe instead of writing at a particular time, I'll, you know, read blog posts and listen to podcasts about writing. So that kind of helps with the guilt a little bit about not getting any writing done, because I'm still working on craft and that kind of thing. And that kind of takes the pressure off a little, because I think we put so much pressure on ourselves, you know, like you were saying, you know, a certain word count, that kind of thing.
Right.
But this way, I feel if I'm doing something writing related, it's a little bit less stressful and less pressure. So those are my 2 big go-tos.
I love that. I have found, you know, that walking, I hate to run. The people who are like, oh, look at the runner side, I'm like, I feel like I'm gonna die. But I love to go for walks. I could walk for hours, and that is something that really helps me too, just to be moving, to be out in the fresh air, and, you know, just to I like to listen to different podcasts too while I walk if my other two kids aren't with me. If they're with me, I have to, they've always got something to chat about. But, there's so much goodness in taking a break, and as I like to say, not riding is still riding. There's so much that you have to do to take care of yourself and to make sure your batteries are full before you can sit down and do this very emotional thing that is riding at times.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing those tips. I think the world is really crazy right now. So all the tips we can get for managing our emotions and care of ourselves is good.
Oh, yeah. Very important. Yes.
Well, I have just one last question for you. It is a hard one, so I do apologize. I'd love to know what your favorite book is right now. This is not your favorite book of all time, because I don't think anybody can answer that question. But just a book you've read recently that you really loved.
This is the hardest question of all. Well, I'm so lucky that as part of the debut 2021 group, I've been getting advanced reader copies, and I've read some amazing ones. And I'm so grateful to be in this group with these writers. The one that I'm reading right now is called What Beauty There Is by Corey Anderson. It is, I don't even know how to describe it. It is deep and haunting and beautiful. It's just I'm a little bit more than halfway through, and I would easily say this is one of the best books that I've ever read. Wow. And I don't even know what the end is. I don't care what the end is. This is one of the best books I've ever read.
That's amazing.
So, yes, What Beauty There Is by Corey Anderson, and it will be out next year, 2021.
I love it. Well, thank you. I mean, that is high praise to be one of the best books you've ever read.
Yes, definitely should go on everybody's to-be-read list.
Well, good to know. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's a hard question, and it can definitely be hard to narrow it down to one, but the more book recommendations we get is amazing, because there's so many books that come out every week. I mean, we inevitably miss a lot of them.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, telling us all about your awesome sounding novel, List of 10, and, letting me and my listeners get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of Authors and Agents with Rose Quinn. I appreciate every single one of you. And if you would like to rate and review this podcast, that would make my day. If you can't rate and review it, tag me in something cool about it on Instagram and Twitter. That also makes my day. @RoseQuinny, QUINNY. See you next time.